Hello, welcome to School Committee Update. Today with the Ward 2 member and chair of the school committee, Ilana Krepchin. I'm Sarah Fishman. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I am good. Less soggy than before. Raining. So let's do some quick bio background. How long have you been on school committee?
Almost 5 years. So 2 full terms, and I started my first term a little early because my predecessor left early.
Okay. And you were you're in your first term as chair, is that right?
Correct. I actually became chair in July of last
Okay.
year, which is slightly unusual. Usually it's a January to January term, but the previous chair stepped down at the end of June last year. So it's been almost a year that I've been chair.
Okay. All right. And you have one student in Somerville Public Schools?
Yes, they are finishing 10th grade.
Okay. And let's see, what else do we want to know? You have another professional hat, which is?
Correct. I make jewelry and sculpture, which is what my day job is.
Yeah. And you are wearing some of your wares.
I am.
Yes.
Earrings and some bracelets as well.
So during Somerville Open Studios, when I was going around, I saw that Eleanor Barish, who's the Ward 6 school committee member and does photography, she was sharing studio space with you. So that was kind of cool, like a double header of school committee people.
Yes, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I meant to ask, I'm going to go back. You are chair, but then you're not a subcommittee chair.
Correct.
Because you're chair.
As the chair of the committee.
But you're a negotiation representative? What is that?
I am still listed as that. We aren't currently in negotiations with our teachers union, but when we are actively negotiating, we typically have 2 school committee members who are reps to the team who goes and negotiates. When we do that again, which will be this coming year, I'm not sure whether I will be one of the people on that or not.
So the website needs at least a little updating because the picture is not a picture of the current school committee.
Thank you for that feedback. We will work on that.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that person is no longer on it. Someone else is it. Anyway, okay, so let's talk about the school budget. So there was a vote at the last school committee meeting on the 20th of May. So what is the significance of that vote? Because doesn't the city council have to approve the overall budget of which the school budget is a part?
You are correct.
Yeah.
The process is that at first the budget is the superintendent's budget. So the superintendent and their staff spend basically the entire year up until this time creating a budget. And so that's working with department heads and principals and all stakeholders to figure out what's needed and working with the city to figure out how much money the city is going to be able to provide. So that's a process that happens all year long, and it's called the superintendent's budget. And as the superintendent is creating that, we have what are called finance meetings of the whole. So in not finance season, the finance meetings are a subcommittee, but during finance season, it's the entire school committee. And during those, we get reports from the superintendent and the chief financial officer and other staff members on where the budget is going, where they are at the moment, what the asks are, what the difficulties are, what the city is saying they're going to give, even though it's not definite yet. All of those things are covered. And then at the end of that process, there is a budget hearing, which is a state-mandated activity where the superintendent and their staff present the budget to the public, and it's an opportunity for public comment. Although, as you know, members of the community also reach out to individual school committee members. They'll give public comment at our regular meetings. There's lots of ways for feedback, but that is another way. And then the school committee deliberates. The school committee then votes on that budget, and then it becomes the school committee's budget. At that point, it becomes part of the package that the mayor is presenting to the city council.
Okay.
So it becomes one of those items that the city council could cut, although they can't add, the same way that they can do that for all of their. I won't get into the details of the city council.
No, but that is significant because they don't have the power to add things, only to cut. So the school budget is about a third of the total city budget.
I don't remember the exact amount, but I think it might even be larger than that. But I'd have to look. I don't remember the exact amount.
Historically, something like that, I think. And the budget this year is 4.7%-ish higher than the school budget of last year.
That is correct.
This is for the current one, fiscal year 2025. That is an increase, of course, but it is a smaller increase than in the past 2 years. So 2 years ago,
There
it was
a
a 10%,
yeah.
which was very unusual for it to be double
Yeah.
digit. And then it was an 8%, right, last year?
Correct.
So what is the reason for that decrease in the increase, so to speak?
Just to give a little background,
please.
in the before times, as in before COVID,
Yes.
Typically the city gave the schools approximately a 5% increase. And that's for, I don't know how many years that was the case. It was
Right.
before I was in the school committee. That was approximately sort of the norm, was
Yeah.
a 5% increase. And that allowed for approximately 3%, which is the general inflationary rate. So that
Right.
would be the amount you would need to offer the same services. So an increase in the budget by about 2% in terms of the opportunity for new programming. Then COVID hit. There was a year, that first year, where it was only about a 2-point-something% increase. There was a shrinkage because of all sorts of reasons related to the pandemic. And then there was this influx of federal ESSER dollars.
Which is that the American Rescue Plan Act
Correct.
money?
The ESSER is just the term for the money that is specifically allocated to schools.
So that, and what's that? It's elementary and secondary something, and that it's a
Correct.
It's a
It was
school
a bucket
portion
of money
okay.
up as part of that that's only
Okay.
to
So this is
schools.
economic recovery from
Correct.
the federal government.
Correct.
Okay. Post-COVID.
And that has lasted from then until now. It officially expires in September of this year. So I think we still have a little bit of money to expend from that for some summer programs, but that money is essentially gone.
Yeah.
So what we've been trying to do for the last few years is figure out how we can keep the wonderful people and programs we've added with those federal dollars with local money. So a part of that, 10% that was added was to make up for, first of all, to make up for that year where it was only a 2-point-something% increase, and then also to start the process of rolling over some of those ESSER positions into our general fund so that when we hit the end of those ESSER dollars, we wouldn't be facing what everyone is calling a fiscal cliff.
Yeah.
So although we locally have a smaller increase, as you described it, than we have in the past, we're doing a lot better than a lot of places where they're actually having to make significant cuts.
So how come people are saying that it should be a larger percentage, or how come people are saying this is a dramatic, implying that it's a big difference?
Because we got that 10% and 8%.
Okay.
Because there are real things we could do in our schools if we had significantly more money.
Yeah.
As I think would always be the case, and it's probably the case in all public schools
So,
everywhere.
Do you have a sense of how much the system will be able to retain the people that it added, or that the capacity it added?
That was part of the reason why I was comfortable with this 6.7% increase as opposed to trying to push for more at this moment, is because my concern is that over the long haul, that wouldn't be sustainable.
Okay.
So if you add too much in the moment and the city's fiscal revenue continues to not look good, and I won't speak to what the city's fiscal outlook is because it's not something I'm an expert in, but if then the city's fiscal outlook continues to not look great, that would mean layoffs in the future.
Yeah.
So we're trying to keep what we have and expand it in a sustainable way.
So is that a likelihood, layoffs, or is it?
I mean, as of right now, I don't see why it would be, but
Okay.
it's so hard to know year
You
to
can't
year
know
what the fiscal landscape is going to look
predict
like.
the future. Okay. So was there anything in the budget anything you advocated for, or you especially like once it became, or as it became?
Yeah, I
the
don't know
school
if there was a
committee version?
specific item that I advocated for. I tend to trust our superintendent and principals to bring us what they see on the ground as being needed. I was excited to see that we're expanding the Becoming a Man program, which we've had in the past.
Can you explain what that is? I saw that it's in several different.
It's in several different schools, and we're adding it this year to the Winter Hill. I'm sure I can't do it justice. We did have a presentation from them at one of our meetings a few months ago. It's a program for young male-identifying students of color And it's a wraparound program that has supports during the day, and it also has an after-school program element, and it's just sort of geared at extra support for those students, both academically and socially.
And what years is it?
It's middle school and high school.
Oh, okay. And I saw something called WOW.
And that is working on womanhood,
Is
which
that
is
similar? Yeah.
We only currently have that one at the high school. There was talk of maybe expanding it in the future, but my understanding is that they themselves programmatically are having a difficult time expanding.
Okay. So are these independently run, or are these state
Correct.
programs?
These are independently run that we pay for to have in the district.
Okay. And then there was, stop me if we're getting kind of too knee deep in ankle
That's okay.
high. The out of school time programming, that the money got moved around.
The money got moved around. And there wasn't a change in the amount of money per se. It was just an effort by the district to make the budget more transparent.
Okay.
So people reading the budget could understand how much money we were spending on it. Because before it was embedded in each individual school, so that it also looked like schools that had this Becoming a Man program, for example, had this much larger budget, but that looked weird in terms of the rest of the school's budgets are more things like copy paper and field trips. And so it's just made more sense. And it was
how
cleaner
many of
to
the
move
schools
that.
have that? I mean, the Brown School doesn't probably have kids who are old enough.
Correct. Right now, it's definitely at the Healy and the high school, and we're expanding it to Winter Hill. I don't remember at the moment if it's at one more school or not. I'd have to look.
So is that a capacity issue on their end where it goes? And
Partially, yes.
Okay. All right. We should probably talk now about the public comments made at the last school committee meeting on the Israel-Gaza war. Very strong emotions there. We're going to focus, I think, on process right now, but say as you want, obviously. So how did this come about, all these public comments? Was it a hearing?
It was not a hearing. It was just a regular school committee meeting where we always have public comment on the agenda.
At the beginning of the meeting?
At the beginning of the meeting. I did, process-wise, move our presentation. So we had Winter Hill students in the 8th grade who did an amazing civics project, and they were coming for that meeting to present to us.
And they were first.
They were first, and that was intentional because I knew we were going to have a lot of public comment to make sure that they would be able to get out of there at a reasonable time and be able to go home.
Yeah. Okay, so it was organized by people other than the school committee, that there were there was that groundswell of comment.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So what is your opinion? And I know you made a point of announcing that what one school committee member says is not speaking for the whole committee. So feel free to differentiate. But what action, if any, do you think the school committee should take as a result of people speaking out against the war?
So to your point, I will again just reiterate that I'm only speaking for myself.
Okay.
No individual school committee member speaks for the full committee unless we vote on such a thing. I don't think it's our place to be wading in sort of writ large, big picture. There were some issues brought up. For example, there has been talk about our policy around excused absences for students at the high school leaving for protests.
Yes, I want to talk about that.
And so that is definitely something that is in the purview of the school committee.
Right.
So we can talk about that a little. There was also talk about perceived anti-Semitism in our schools, perceived anti-Islamophobia. It's hard to know exactly what the school committee purview on that is. The schools writ large, obviously, our purview, and we write policies. So we could revisit our policies to figure out in terms of hate speech or other things like that and how those are handled. But in terms of the day-to-day running of the district, that is the superintendent's job. Does that help?
I think this issue is such that it's never going to be, there never can be as full a reply as maybe one or some people wish, but yes, that certainly speaks to the question. So let's talk about the absences. So back in November and then 2 times more recently, some high school students left class in protest. And can you explain what the issue is with the absences?
So currently, in the high school handbook,
yes,
it is written that if students leave for an organized protest, their absences can be marked excused, which still means they have to make up the work of classes they miss. Like, I think there's also some sort of misunderstandings about what an excused versus an unexcused absence even means. But it is listed as an excused absence.
Okay.
And that is essentially all it says in the handbook. And I did just ask recently, because it's been that way since I've been on the school committee. This isn't a new thing.
Okay.
My understanding is that it was something Mary Skipper brought on during her tenure, and it was in response to the Parkland shooting and sort of upswell in students wanting to
Well, that's interesting.
to protest and
She's
talk about this.
the most recent past superintendent, we should probably say.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so if students left class for that, then they are excused.
Correct.
So then what was the issue this time with students leaving? Because it seems like
There was not an issue.
There was not an issue.
What people are preemptively concerned that we are planning to change this
I see.
policy.
Okay.
So that's what
The concern
is. Correct.
Okay. So is that something you guys are thinking about?
So
or?
the principal is, the Somerville High School principal has brought a number of changes to the handbook, many of them
This is
fairly
Alicia
mundane.
Kirsten?
This is Alicia Kirsten, correct.
Yeah.
A number of them quite mundane. And one of them was thinking about changing this policy. What that might look like is still unclear.
So was that before? How far back was that?
So she has been thinking about this for over a year as to, does this policy as written make sense?
Okay.
It's just in the recent, so it feels to the public like this is in response to the current situation.
Yeah.
I totally understand the public's perception that that's the case.
Okay. But right now,
there's
are
not
excused if they
correct.
are
That is the
doing-
current policy.
Yeah.
If you leave for a protest, the absences are unexcused.
There's a.
The absences are excused.
Excused. So there was a member of the city council, recent past member, who told me once that she took a class in college where she would ask the professor, can I leave? And the topic of the class was such that he would say, oh yeah, go do that. That's in the spirit of it. And at least one of the speakers at the school committee meeting sort of talked along those lines. Okay, so that's that policy. So is there anything else that you had wished happened or didn't happen in how you were leading the meeting?
Yes.
So how did it feel like it was appropriately progressing? I don't know.
felt in retrospect like I could have done a better job sticking to the 2-minute limit.
There was a clock, right?
There was a clock.
Yeah.
But there's not exactly a good mechanism for cutting people off. And it's
Yeah.
very awkward to literally cut somebody off mid-sentence. And so I did my best, but I'm not sure that I was as consistent with the sharp cutoff at 2 minutes as I could have been.
I think for upcoming presidential debates, they're going to turn off the microphone after a certain period of time so that people can't speak past that time. But that does feel kind of like you're cutting off.
Right, and that is an
discussion.
option.
Yeah.
There is a microphone there, but the people in the audience could still hear it, and so that's only at home that you wouldn't hear it if the
and that would
microphone was
be
cut off. So
weird.
it's
And I was
not
watching from
really a
home.
great option. So I don't know what the solution is, but that would be my only sort of self-criticism in retrospect.
Okay. So now at least one person said that referred to students and staff being disciplined for voicing certain political views. Has that happened?
To my knowledge, that has not happened.
So where is that perception coming from? Do you have any idea?
I do not know.
Okay.
And I should say that's the kind of thing that isn't at the school committee level. That would be the kind of thing that the superintendent handles. So I'm not saying that.
Well, doesn't it depend on, I mean, there was one school committee member who had said certain things, and I thought that the comments were in reference to that. So if it's a school committee member speaking, isn't that a school committee issue? I'm not trying to yank your chain. I'm just trying to understand.
I understand the question, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out sort of how to answer it, because there are times when school committee members may bring something up that actually isn't the purview of the school committee, which is why we wouldn't then take it up for discussion and or do anything about it. Does that make sense?
Sorta. I don't know if there's
So I should clarify that,
Yeah.
that during the items from board members part of our meeting,
yeah,
typically school committee members can say whatever it is they want.
okay.
If it's something that's not on the agenda, it's not something we are then going to discuss. Because of state open meeting law, we can't discuss things that aren't on the agenda.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So is there any consequence to if one member says something that seems to be inflammatory from the perspective of some public individuals? Is there any recourse within the school committee for how that's handled? Do you?
That is a good question that I
Yeah.
have never quite had to do as chair,
Yeah,
so I'm not
yeah.
actually sure. It's a good
Okay.
question.
Because it seemed like that was an issue in there amongst the others. Okay. All right. Well, I think it's very hard to do this justice. So I appreciate your, answering as you have. Let's switch to something different, which is the Winter Hill Community School. Just very quickly, can you say what happened last year there?
Sure, we had
Yeah.
a piece of concrete fall from the ceiling,
Yeah.
and there were concerns that students couldn't use the building.
Was-
It was actually almost a year ago.
I know. I was just
today.
realizing that.
Yeah,
It was beginning of July or end of June or?
it was right at the end of May.
Oh,
we
was
had
at
2
the
weeks
end of
left
May.
of school.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, that's right.
Yep.
So, okay, and those kids are somewhere else.
Those kids are at the Edgerly School.
Now they're all at the.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the district has applied for state funding.
Correct.
Where are we in that process?
So we are in a queue to get funding, essentially. So we are in the process now.
Well, that's very good.
Yes.
I don't know how publicly that's been announced.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know exactly where we were. Okay, and what's the timeline?
My
Yeah,
understanding is 5 to 7 years, perhaps starting a year ago from when we sort of first were
When we
given
would
the
receive money?
receiving. From when there'll be a new school. From when
My question is, when would the district receive money?
So that's part of where we are in the process to
Okay.
figure that out. And
Okay.
part of that process involves the city making sure that we can pass an override so that the city can pay for the portion of the school
It's-
building that the city
which is
will
what
be
happened with the
responsible
high
for,
school.
which is correct, which is what happened with the high
So,
school.
yeah.
So I don't know exactly when that will be on the ballot, but that will be a part of the process.
So in other words, that has to happen first.
Correct.
Okay.
Because the MSBA won't give you money unless you can prove that you can pay for your
And that's
portion.
the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. All right, now there's a report due on June 4th.
Yep.
What is that all about?
That is essentially, it's one in a process of sort of bureaucratic things. It's a educational questionnaire. It's just
Yeah.
sort of digging deeper into how many students and how many classrooms and what are the special programmings in the school and all of those kinds of questions.
Yeah, okay. And do you have a sense of what the amount would be, or is that not something that's knowable?
I don't even think we're close to being able to say that
Figure
yet.
that out. And what about the students? Are they going to just stay at the Edgerly? Is that
Yes.
okay? At one point, it didn't have a kitchen or something that was
Yeah,
functioning.
I mean, it is not ideal.
Yeah.
I won't sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
But there aren't any other options currently in the city.
Yeah.
We have been pushing the city to do some improvements over the summer. So one of the things that happened is that the Edgerly didn't have enough space for the entire school. So we had to put pre-K and K at the Capuano, where we did have a few extra classrooms. And one of the things we heard time and again from families and from staff is that the top priority was to make the school whole again.
Because otherwise you could have 2 kids and you could be going to 2 different
Correct.
schools.
Correct.
And trying to get
community
to work
and
and
making a community
yeah,
and all
more,
of that.
Yeah.
And so that was a priority for the city, and they are doing that this summer. They've figured out a workaround of reconfiguring classrooms, and I don't know exactly what their plan is, but they have figured out a way to make the community whole for September. And my understanding is that there are some other building improvements happening over the summer.
Okay, so the effort to get state funding, is that specifically for a new building, or is it possibly for rebuilding as well?
So technically the funding is for either. I'm certainly no architect, but my understanding is that it'll need to be rebuilt and not refurbished.
Okay.
But that is my understanding.
Okay. And is it definitely for just the Winter Hill School, or is it potentially also the Brown School as well?
That is also still to be determined.
Because I've heard different answers on that.
The answer to that is that I do not know.
Okay.
And that is the mayor's decision ultimately.
Okay. All right. That's a good answer, though. Yeah, you know, if you don't know, you say you don't know. Okay.
Well, I mean, I don't know because nobody knows yet because
Right.
it hasn't been decided.
Well, that's interesting because I have been given different, more knowingly stated
From my
answers.
understanding from
Okay.
any public meeting that I have been in
Okay.
is that I don't know because there
Okay.
isn't an answer yet.
All right. I want to just briefly go back that when I was talking about the June 4th report, that reminded me the high school graduation's on June 3rd, just in a few days. So is the city or schools going to do anything different in terms of security or other preparations in case there's a protest?
I haven't heard anything
like that.
like that.
Yeah.
So I don't think so.
Okay. All right. All right. So we don't have a whole lot of time. We're going to discuss something I know almost nothing about. Oh, we only have 1 minute. Excellent.
Okay. Good timing.
Can you just say what net zero emissions, any new school building has to have that? What does that
My understanding simply means that it's not adding any carbon into the environment.
Okay, that is my level of understanding too, which is a very limited understanding. Okay. This has been School Committee Update. Have a good day.